look at the papers and relax are in caps, and the last one's only half.
She's a teacher coming out of retirement, so.
Well, first of all, I want to say I'm very happy to be here. You're supposed to laugh because I'm in terminal condition, and I'm very happy to be here, and that's sincere. And I didn't expect you to laugh because you probably all watched the Oscars last night, and after a host, I'd be pretty low-key, I think. My name is Rhena, and I have ALS. And it's my understanding that you might be interested to know how I made my decision about my breathing when I reached final stages of my disorder. And I must say, I thought I was doing pretty well till I listened to this all over again. I thought, wow, I think I'm in trouble. I also wanted to discuss, because I was here last year for the first time, and I did my thing, but then in a year, I have a few other little things that I want to stick in, but they really don't have all that much to do with the ALS thing, but I realize you're students, and I'm a teacher, and this is my chance. So I tried to figure out a smooth way of fitting them into the talk, and there's just no way they did. So I'm going to do the talk, and I'm going to stop and insert these arbitrarily, and then I'm going to do the conclusion. So there's supposed to be some suspense in that, so you'll hear what my suggestions at the end. So on May the 9th, 2000 at 4:30 in the afternoon, I was told that I had ALS and could expect between 2 to 5 years to live. That was a pretty stark message, and it was given to me in the ancient basement of the Civic Hospital. If you haven't been there, go. I left that room and walked down the longest, most barren hall I had ever experienced. And I guess it was metaphorical. I was entering the unknown, and for a fiercely independent type A personality, that was traumatic. You know, we like to be in charge, we must know, we have to direct, we need solutions promptly. I was facing a terminal illness that would not allow me to do my life in the manner in which I was accustomed. Two stunning realizations came to mind. I'm going to die, and the other realization was in the form of a picture in my mind of Sue Rodriguez. Both those realizations were pretty stunning, and pardon the pun, paralyzing. I spent the following week telling my diagnosis personally to 30 of my family and close friends, individually too. And I learned several things in that next little while. The first thing I learned was that talking about the diagnosis helps one own the reality and accept it. I mean, you kind of hear it, but you don't really accept it yet, and you don't know it for sure. The other thing I learned was that I had never really thought about death, and certainly not about mine, other than that one should probably plan a funeral, or at least tell some people how you felt about anything that you thought was important when you died. And I did know the sadness and finality of death from traumatic accidents in my family and extended family, and the ensuing funerals, but I mean, I hadn't thought about what I really believed about death itself or the actual act of death. However, time passed, and I realized that although I was going to die, it wasn't going to be tomorrow, and I found out about resources and agencies and home care and ALS clinics and ALS societies and inventive devices and government programs and pulmonary tests, and on and on and on. And I learned about falling on the floor, and I learned about lifelines. This is it, by the way. Unsuitable clothing, narrow doorways, clerks who couldn't look at you and always talk to the normal person who was pushing your chair, even though you were the one with the money in your hand. And wonderful little kids who directly and innocently wanted to know, what's wrong with you, and does your chair peak when you back up? And all the while I was slowly but surely getting weaker and able to do less physically, like walking, lifting, climbing stairs, getting on and off toilets, and in and out of the bathtub, but also experiencing the amazing inventiveness of my sons, of whom I have 3 more besides Sean, who insisted that if I could articulate the problems, they could create a solution. So that tuition for 2 engineers. Yeah. Hence, I have a hairdryer that, although affixed to the wall, pulls out and moves around at the end, so I don't have to hold it. And they came up with a means of me turning the water on in the bathtub when I'm sitting on a bath bench, so I didn't have to lean or stretch or run the risk of losing my balance. I have a portable step, which I can't use now, but I've gone through all these. A portable 4-inch step that made 8-inch steps, which is the norm, into a manageable thing, because I could take my little 4-inch step 1 foot on it and 4 inches up and move it up and so on. So, and I had a portable brace that went from the back of the commode to the wall so that when people were doing transfers, it didn't move and I didn't fall on the floor. But then came the time to proactively decide about the breathing issue. And Dr. Kim's department, well represented here, and I believe it was Kathy who did the workshop for sure, acquainted participants with the options and the pros and cons. And I must say, it was an excellent workshop. And I am very critical because I organized lots of them and sat through lots of them. And by this time, I had and it really showed us various decisions and various devices, and didn't tell us what we should do, but it showed us. And in the meantime, I had had a chance to read and question and think, and I made my decision. And it's my decision, the one that seems right for me. And in reflection, I believe there are a number of objective factors that help one reach that decision, whether it's mine or yours. I think there are objective factors. And each of those factors kind of has a spectrum from least or little to most or lots. And hence, since we're all products of our lived experience, we'll all be somewhere on all of these factors, but not in the same place. And so, I think these factors are this, and I think I have listed 9 of them, or maybe more. The first one I think about is affirmation. And I use that term, a general feeling of being loved and accepted and respected, which you probably don't even question. You grow up with that, but to varying degrees. We have large extended families. We may have a different experience than someone who has a mom and dad and the grandparents and everybody else lives somewhere else and they don't have the same kind of exposure to a lot of people giving you affirmation. That will differ. Independence, your capacity and experience to make one's own decision. Whether you're hardwired that way or you learned it, the degree of independence you experience yourself, I think, is a factor. A third one, I think, is your problem solving or adaptability. And again, on a scale, where are you? What skills and experiences in problem solving have you had, and how do you prefer to deal with that? Your age. I'm sure if I were the 27-year-old who had a diagnosis as opposed to the retired woman who'd had a career and a family and lots of wonderful experiences, I might feel very differently about this and make decisions in a different kind of way. I think your experience of death is very important, whether it's passive or active or positive or negative, or, you know, what that's going to be so different for varying people. Your dog died, or your mother died, or whatever. And the other one, another one, I'm not sure what various people would call it various things. Your spiritual status, your fear dimension, your ability to cope with stress, whatever all of that is, whatever you rely on in a belief system will be another factor. And I think your state of health. Believe it or not, I had probably the world's greatest immune system. Virtually never used a sick day, whatever, and then here I sit. So obviously my immune system isn't perfect, but it was for quite a long time. So I didn't have bad knees, and I didn't have diabetes, and I didn't have a bad heart, and all these things that could make my situation a whole lot different. So I think your state of health is one of those things that will determine how you take a decision. And then your support system, medical, caregiving, and social. The assurance of availability of insurance, of money, of personnel, of services, of caring and loving and attending to in social kinds of ways. And then also, I think, knowledge. How much actual knowledge do you have about what will happen, or about ALS itself, or the implications of your decisions and so on. Now, my lived experience, since I've given you the that list of objective factors, I think. But then it comes to what's my lived experience. I'm from a very large extended family with a remarkable hospitality. All problems are naturally attended to by family. And I mean big family. Gather the folks, comfort, feed, and talk. Another situation, I had 4 children in 3.5 years. Flexibility was my key to sanity.
When you were 20.
Yeah, that's right. So, you learn to be flexible. You don't stop and think, I should learn this skill set because someday I might need it. You're going to do it right then, right there. And so then, later then, I had a job. I had 4 children, a husband, community commitments, professional commitments, church involvement, and friends, which required, that whole thing required constant priority setting. Is it one thing more important than another thing at any time? So you have to be present to the moment. So you learn to set your priorities. I was a union president. I was a teacher, but for the last 10 years of my teaching career, I was the union president for 600 members. You develop a set of problem-solving skills. And I must have, because I didn't have a strike, and I didn't have a walkout, and I didn't have an arbitration, grievance go to arbitration. So somehow I got a set of problem-solving skills in there. And I dealt with contract management and professional development and lobbying and networking. And so you get a skill set. And I had to cut to the core. What's the problem? What are the options? What's achievable? You have to learn to take a decision, and you have to learn to take it pretty fast. But you have to get some information first. And I've also been a friend. I have several close friends for 53 years. I have several others for 35 years, and many faithful work colleagues who are friends that I've had all through my work career. And being present to the moment takes a new meaning. If you are really going to be a friend, you have to work at it. You might not have to right now because your friends are around you, your colleagues are there every day, you see them when you go to class, whatever. As time goes on, that doesn't happen. So if you want to maintain that friendship, you have to work at it. And sometimes when you don't feel like it, you have to call and listen to somebody go on and on about something that you think, big deal, who cares? But you do, and you have to make arrangement to go to lunch, even though you've got 50 other more important things like vacuuming or something to do. And so you really have to work at it. But when the chips are down, those are the people who are there for you. And I also had an well, I told you about the immune system, so forget that. And in my profession, I had excellent health benefits. That's reality too. I have also attended to 3 deaths in my family, in my extended family. Young people who died tragically. And here's a few other things that would affect my decision. I'm far more frightened of what happens while I'm living than I am about dying. I mean, I could be drooling in a corner, saliva running down the side of my face, and you're staring at me. That would be scary for me, the idea of dying, I think. So the idea of living is more frightening. And I'm a control freak. I would never turn decisions in my life over to someone else. That's pretty important too, because I'm not passing it off on somebody else if I have to make a decision, because that fits right with me. Now, I told you I was going to, hang on to that. We're going to come to what decision you're going to make in a minute. Now I'm arbitrarily inserting those little issues or beliefs or things. See, I want to do this now because if they offend you, then I know, number one, you're not ready to be a doctor yet because you're still personalizing. And 2, they'll give you a little chance to get over that when I tell you the end, because you have to be sad and nice to me at the end. So, here goes. I believe in the power of language. If you're told you have an illness, you expect to be ill. I'm not sick. Could we change the language? So don't refer to me as being sick or my illness. I believe in stressing the positive instead of the negative. Could we begin a meeting with a healthcare professional with what I can still do before we begin the litany of what I can't do? The quality of the time I have, how I value it, and how I avoid depression is dependent upon positive thinking. I expect healthcare professionals to understand and respect that and to integrate that into their interactions with me. No holds barred there. And just because I have a disorder doesn't mean I don't have a life. When you're setting appointments with me, could we respect that I too have commitments, meals, bodily functions, and limited energy? And I will give you an example there because I'm sure the person that I was involved with this would agree with me telling me, first of all, I have to say, none of these things applies to Dr.
I was starting to get offended.
No, none apply to him. It's just other people I run into. But I had a situation, because you see, in my situation, some people sometimes have to come to you. And an appointment was made with an occupational therapist who was going to come and visit me. So I received the John the Baptist phoning ahead of time call saying she's going to come on Tuesday in the morning. Oh, between 9 and 1. And she'll call, and I said, when between? Well, she'll call and tell you. Well, I waited, and it was Monday, and she was coming on Tuesday, and I called on Monday. Haven't heard from this person. When would that be? Oh, well, she'll call for sure. But it's going to be between 9 and 1. Tuesday morning came at 9 o'clock, I had no phone call. I called back and said, I still haven't heard. That's terrible. So somebody went off to find out, let me know, and they didn't. And at 10 to 1, but see, I had somebody coming in for something fun at 1:30. And I wasn't canceling that because why would I? And so at 10 to 1, in walks my occupational therapist, happy as a lark. And I said, oh, did you have a problem with my phone? Oh, what do you mean? And I said, well, I was told you were going to call and tell me when you'd be here between 9 and 1. Oh, well, next time she'll call. And I said, I'm not an unreasonable person. I don't expect you to say 10:15 and walk through the door at 10:15. But 4 hours is quite a while. And in 4 hours, I'm going to eat and I'm going to go to the bathroom. And quite frankly, I don't want you walking in the middle of either. So how about a couple hours? Then I can work around it. And so anyway, I did this very nicely, of course. And she responded very well because she'd been doing it for a long time. But I knew it set her back on her heels. So as she came to the table, and I said, and I also have someone coming up 1:30, but I'm sure we can get through this in 40 minutes. And so she sat down, and then I said to her, and the real reason I'm saying this is because I have this scary feeling that people like you think that people like me don't have a life. And we're just here doing nothing all day, so you can come whenever you feel like it. Of course, that's where we're going to drop that, put a period at the end. But because that person wouldn't want to consciously think that that's what she was thinking. But in fact, unconsciously it is. The same thing if you get on a plane. You get stuck at the back because everybody assumes, oh, you must be going to the hospital or to visit Aunt Susie. So you don't have to get off early. But if I'm a business person, I need off. Why am I not sitting at the front too? We get parked to the back. Anyway, those are all just little unconscious things that I needed to get out there. Also, when you're treating me, could we remember that I'm not a disorder, I'm a person with a disorder. And when I'm required to make heavy decisions, this one's a little, I don't know if I explained this very well, but when I'm required to make a heavy decision, could we realize that helping me objectify my condition helps me take charge of the decision making instead of, I think I have run into a lot of people who feel that this is something that happened to them personally as opposed to objectively, and it almost paralyzes them in their decision making because it's coming from the outside, folks, and so what can I do? So I think if you help me to talk about it objectively, it helps me take part in the decision making, and I won't see it as something being done to me. And one more peeve or issue is related to, again, to language. Could we stop using war metaphors when describing our living with this disorder? Like battling and fighting and winning and losing, beating. Like, why the violence? That's just one of those things that has insidiously come along with us. And instead, could I suggest that we concentrate on prioritizing, helping, adjusting, being flexible, solving, articulating. End of the complaints. Still got the lived experience. Here's the decision. Having gathered as much information, well, I think I said this to people last year. You may know more about the medical end of this than I do, so if I'm wrong, don't bother telling me, let me find out myself. Having gathered as much information as possible, From credible and scientific sources, and having reflected very seriously on the options and their impacts, I've decided to have no extraordinary or invasive techniques to assist breathing. As my breathing slows, I expect that so will my ability and desire to do things, a kind of a gradual withdrawal from the life thing. My family respects my right to make my decision about my death, as they have respected my right to make the decisions about my life. No one who knows me is surprised in the slightest by my decision. And I expect to be kept comfortable relative to pain and anxiety through medication. It's 21st century. And I expect to die having spent wonderful time with family and friends and known their love, sensitivity, and care. Quite frankly, I don't find that right. End of story. I'm presuming you're going to do questions some other time.
Would you like to do questions
I
later?
don't mind, but whatever way you make one.
Well, we probably should do them now while
But
they're
we
fresh
should
in
set a
people's
time limit,
minds.
so Nigel can.
Okay, it's time limit.
All right.
I just wanted you to appreciate that, you know, what the Charlands brought to the discussion is a background into the decision-making process, which you may never hear again. You will be in a position of talking to people about their decision-making, and you may speculate about some of these things, but you may not have, you know, that kind of insight again into the factors that come into play when people make decisions. That was very important and very enlightening. I did want you to observe also some of the ethical principles that she illustrated. So, for example, what is the ventilation education session that she described that Kathy provided? Well, that is disclosure. Okay, it is informed consent. Okay, those are very important principles that are being carried out. And the other thing that I'm sure you would agree with is that Ms. Charland is exercising her autonomy fully and completely. If you have questions, please go ahead.
I've never heard of a lifeline before. Do you mind just describing, I guess, what it is and how it works?
This does not work here, but it works in my apartment. I live by myself in my apartment. And this, if I push the middle of this, it rings in somewhere. God knows, Calcutta, Houston, Texas, I don't know. But it rings somewhere, and right away, somebody calls me back. And an extremely professionally trained person says, Mrs. Charland, how can we help you? If I'm unconscious and not answering, I guess they just phone 911. No, they don't. They have a list of 3 people that I have given them to call, 1, 2, 3, that they might reach. If they didn't, they would then call 911 on their own. But they call, for example, Sean, and say, your mother has fallen. If I'm conscious, I'm telling them I have fallen, but I'm not bleeding, and I'm not in pain. And they call Sean, and then they call me back and say he'll be there in 10 minutes. 10 minutes, they call me back and say, is Sean there? Half an hour later, they say, have you solved the problem? And the next day, they call me back and say, are you okay? It's great. It costs $48 a month.
Any other questions? Yes.
You just talked about the choice that you made to receive for no assisted respiratory. I was just wondering if you had ever thought of this before you were diagnosed, or had that changed? I mean, if you had, then had it changed your decision?
I had never thought about it. I didn't have any reason to, you know. But, and at the very beginning, I didn't think about it. You know, I was just so concentrating on what's going on here. But since I made the decision, and I'm not doing this because Kathy's here, but that workshop was very enlightening for me. And it did make me think about the various things. And one of the things I really thought about, I mean, I hope this is the way it is, that's why I say the withdrawal thing, because to me, this is a body that is gradually deteriorating. And it's probably a whole thing, you know, that is going to hell in a handbasket. But if I were to have my little old brain receiving whatever it needs to receive, oxygen, just keeping it going, so I'm like wide-eyed and woolly, and I can't move anything. What a horrible situation that would be. I would see myself, when I leave here, Dr. McKim may say, don't listen to anything she's saying, because she's crazy. But my idea would be that I would have created for myself that trap that outsiders always talk about. You're trapped in this body, that you can think, but you can't do anything. Hey, I got some news for you. You wouldn't believe what professional healthcare workers can do for you. It's pretty nice. Saturday mornings are like sauna morning for me. The spa, and I never had so many people. No, maybe once in a while, but not so many people. Putting cream on you and bathing you and powdering you in places you didn't even know you had and all that. It's really very great. So, I mean, I had to get used to that idea. And also, let's face the fact here. I was diagnosed in 2000. I beat those odds, I guess. There's my using the beat that I said I wouldn't use. But I never said, I'm going to win this, I'm going to beat ALS, I'm going to get better at that. I just don't believe it. But it just happens that here I am, and I had it 3 years before. I know from the symptoms I had it 3 years before that. So the fact is, I've had a lot of time to think about this. Maybe if I had bulbar onset, I'd be history 4 years ago, or more than that. And so I wouldn't have had, so I have had the advantage of having lots of time to get used to ideas and go through things. So I think that, again, is something I could have put in there, but you can't know that ahead of time, what the factors are. But Nancy, I haven't changed my mind since I made it. However, I did tell Dr. McKim, after this wonderful talk, I still reserve the right to panic. Maybe. Yes?
Just quickly, one more. Yeah.
Okay, you said just now that you thought that maybe you had the disease or disorder for 3 years previous to your diagnosis. So if you were feeling symptoms, did you have any idea in your head maybe what it was before the day of your diagnosis, and how did that?
I didn't, because there was no soreness, no pain, no swelling, no rash, no nothing. And I kept trying to think, if I went to the doctor, what would I say? I have trouble walking, but I can't describe that. It was with 1 foot maybe. Maybe 1 foot was doing something different, but I couldn't describe anything. And I had a very sedentary job, and I thought, oh, I've retired and I'm finally, this is catching up to me, and I need an exercise program and all this kind of stuff, and I exercised. Felt better after exercise, you always do, but it didn't change climbing stairs, and didn't do anything. So I finally went for a checkup, and it was told, as usual, you're in excellent condition, nothing wrong with you. But my doctor was very smart to say, and I said, then why can't I walk? Why can't I climb stairs? He said, checkup just tells you there's nothing wrong with any of the things we checked. And then, so I did the exercise thing, went off and tried it. 6 months later, went back. He said, it's your head or your back. So, well, you go to the neurologist. And that was that. But I didn't have anything that would, like I said, I had symptoms because I fell off the edge of a boat, which I normally wouldn't have done, and I wasn't drinking. And I was hosting somebody's retirement. I went to sit down in the chair and I fell on the floor. That wasn't too graceful. And I had little things like that I kept thinking, surely this shouldn't happen to you when you're 57. But it did, so there.
We're going to get set up,
Yep.
Mr. Van Loan.
Be here.
And there will be time, I
Thank
think,
you very much.